Good
Hey,
to
Blossom.
see you again.
Yes, it's so good to be back on here. I've been watching your growth and your progress over the last few months, and I'm so happy you're still doing these conversations.
Yeah.
Quarantine is over in a lot of places, but we're still having these Pilates chats, which I also feel is really important. So thanks for keeping it going.
Well, it's people like you that cheer me on because I mean, like, guys, Alexa will send me a message to say like, "Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this person? Have you looked at this?" Or like, she's like my coordinator in the background at certain points. So I really appreciate people that like yourself that are like you're there in the background and you help me. You push this forward.
We want to see it keep going. So.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely feel
Yes.
like, but I think I said this the last time I was on too, that I kept looking for a Pilates podcast. And I know there have been a couple of people who put some stuff out there, but
Mhm.
those were things from years back, and I couldn't really relate to the conversations they were having. And I want to say it's usually people just talking about Pilates itself, which
Yes.
which can be quite, it can be quite bland,
Mhm.
versus having conversations with individuals in the space, which I think is really interesting to hear other teachers' perspectives. So, yeah,
Yes.
so I enjoy it, and I hope this is going to stay around, and
Yeah.
we're still going to be doing this for a little while at least.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
booked through this month at least. I mean, it's
Yay.
it's crazy.
That's
Um,
good.
Before we go too far with that, I do have something to say on that
Mhm.
podcast piece. But for those who are watching and just don't know, you can just say your name and your business.
Oh, so my name is Alexa Idama, and I'm Low Impact Fit on Instagram. It's so strange for me still to think about what I'm doing as a business because I don't think I didn't, I didn't wake up one day and say I'm starting a business today. But I guess like I
Yes.
thought about it a couple of days ago, I guess it is a business because I am working, I am coordinating my clients and I am, like working with people.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I'm not sure if I have a name for my business yet because my business is me right now.
Yes.
But yes, if you want to do Pilates, send me a message and I'm here for you.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm working
Mhm.
with a lot of people one on one and with a couple of small groups. So it's not necessarily a physical establishment. I do work with Joel. So a lot of my clients I train at Joel Studio, which is JC Vitality Method, and I
Yes.
work at a couple of other studios too, which are all in the North Atlanta area. A new one that I started working at that I really like is Joey. So she has a really nice setup, and it's a really cute studio up and coming if you're in this area.
Very
Yes,
cool.
but in terms of yeah, my closest studio is Joel's studio, and I work with him here in Duluth.
Yes.
Hmm.
And it's interesting that like you say like you don't have a business, but the reality is you do have a brand.
Hmm. Yes.
Which is interesting, right? To say like your business doesn't have a name per se,
Hmm.
but you definitely have a brand. You have followers, you have a voice, you have impact. You're putting stuff out that is picking up traction just because it's smart and it's relevant. So you definitely have a great brand.
Yes, and I think what I stand for, I came onto Instagram, like one of the things that made me come on this space and start sharing was the fact that I didn't see a lot of people necessarily who looked like me, who were consistently sharing, who were consistently sharing workouts and information. And I'm going to go ahead and say I did not see anybody who looked like me who was doing anything in the classical space on a
Mhm.
consistent basis. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but in terms of
Right.
sharing on social media, I didn't really see a lot of people who look like me sharing classical exercises, or some of the classical work on social media. And also another thing that I'm really passionate about is educating people on the fact that not all your workouts have to be super high intensity and really hard,
Yes.
especially if those really high intensity workouts are not actually working for your body. There's so many
Mhm.
different ways to work out, and these are some of the options that you have. So while I do show some Pilates, I still focus on the side of just working out, like just
Yes.
moving, just moving. That's not high impact, and
Right.
it's still efficient and intelligent and creates change within the body and makes you feel good. So
Mhm.
there's that side of things too.
And
Hmm.
it's funny. I was looking at one of your past posts with your TRX work,
Yes.
and knowing that you do yoga and as well, like you
Hmm.
have great flexibility and stuff. And there's like I'm a TRX guy as well, and I look
Yes.
with just like this little bit of jealousy because I know that your yoga helps you to make those pikes look better and those handstands look better, and I don't have that. So
Well, I did spend about 7 years of my life trying to learn how to jump through. So I think that, and for anybody who doesn't know what a jump through is, if it's in yoga, it's jumping from downward facing dog into a seated position. And I
mm,
feel like that, like if you spend 7 years trying to, I don't want to say I was ever really successful at it, but I did spend a long time trying to get to that space. It does help with, with getting into inversions and doing things like, yeah, doing things like pikes for sure.
right.
Um, but yes,
Nice.
yoga definitely helps. But
Yeah.
I had to work for it. I wasn't a dancer or a gymnast or anything like that. So I definitely did work to get some of that flexibility.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for the person who asks you what the difference between yoga and Pilates is, how do you
Mm-hmm.
differentiate the two?
Um, there are some similarities, but the biggest difference for me is the reason why. The
Hmm.
reason why people do yoga. Yoga is a meditation. And I know that, there are some people who approach it like working out, but if you look at the reason why people started doing yoga, maybe not in the Western world, but definitely in Asia, in Africa, everywhere else where people were doing yoga before it came to the West, it's a meditation. It's supposed to take you more inward. And
Yes.
ultimately, what while there's many definitions of yoga, the most common one from the Yoga Sutras is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which is calming the fluctuations of the busy mind.
Yes.
That is the main intent and purpose of doing yoga, is to calm your mind so that you can find God.
Hmm.
And while, we can argue here about yoga not being religious, I don't think, you can find God in any way that you want, but you calm your mind to find God. And that's the intent of doing a yoga practice. If you
Yes.
find fitness and flexibility and everything else along the way, that's great. But the primary purpose is to find God. Whereas with Pilates, I don't think I ever heard Joseph Pilates. Maybe I've not read enough of his writings and his teachings, but I didn't read that as the primary intent of Pilates, to
Hmm.
find, you might find God along the way too, and there's definitely a meditative aspect to Pilates, but I believe for me, Pilates is more of a workout. And if you find God in the process, then that's a benefit.
Yes.
Whereas with yoga, the intent is to be enlightened. You are
Yes.
working towards enlightenment.
Right.
Pilates, I want to say you might get enlightened with Pilates. There's definitely a calming aspect that I
Hmm.
observe with people who've done it for a long time, and especially like talking to someone with Joel, he definitely will say that there is a meditative aspect to him. But when I get taught Pilates in the studio, that is, the teachers don't emphasize
Right.
meditation.
Right. Right. Right.
Whereas my yoga teachers definitely would be like, just, go,
Mm.
calm down, focus, like calm your thinking patterns. So
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. The my wife teaches yoga and she's
Hmm.
really working on her Pilates right now as well.
Hmm.
And I believe it was her who said it this way. It's almost like yoga is teaching you stillness, where
Hmm.
Pilates is teaching you movement.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, like in a sense that like, well, even think about it this way, like yoga really also was designed to allow you to be able to stay in, like to be in position for that meditative state, right? Like for boys, like so there's a sense of being able to get your body to a place where you can stay in a pose for a long time, and whether it's a stillness of mind or stillness of body,
So
is that similar?
you find like yoga is supposed to make your seat more comfortable. So you're supposed to be able to do lotus more comfortably
Hmm.
if that's the way you meditate. Like
Right.
if that is the way you're going to meditate, it's
Yeah.
supposed to help you do that. However, if your meditation is not sitting, then it's supposed to help you find the same space within walking, or within
Okay.
swimming. Like it's just helping you get to that meditative state so that you can eventually be enlightened.
Cool.
And that really is the goal of yoga, is to be enlightened, is to be one with God, and have God be one with you.
Very
And
cool.
I wish I could say, like, because I know like there's always this debate about whether yoga is it's maybe it's
Quote
not
unquote.
religious, but it's definitely
Yeah.
spiritual. It's a
Yeah. Yeah.
spiritual
Yeah.
practice. And I think the origins of yoga would appreciate people approaching it more like a spiritual practice
Mm-hmm.
versus just a physical practice. And I will say this too, a lot of people think about yoga as triangle pose and, asana, like seated, like doing sun salutations. There are people who practice yoga for 60 years who've never done a sun salutation, who all they do is singing.
Ah,
Or,
yeah.
like their main yoga practice is I know Thich Nhat Hanh, he does walking meditations,
Okay.
and which is also considered yoga practice. So
Mm-hmm.
his yoga practice is waking up every morning and stepping one foot in front of the other. It doesn't look as fancy as what you see in Yoga Journal, but it's yoga.
Right.
And then you
Okay.
have some people like Mother Teresa, whose yoga was selfless service to others. That's also considered yoga. Anything that takes you
Uh,
into that meditative state. And asana or postural practice is such a it's in the Yoga Sutras, I think it gets mentioned once in a
so
book of over
interesting.
100 pages. Yes,
So
so
it's just the commercialized piece of yoga.
so in this book, sorry, mine's a little bit dusty, but in this book, postural
Wow.
practice gets mentioned once. And this is a book about, this whole book is on yoga. It is what, 1,000, I don't know how many pages long. And postural practice is mentioned once.
Really?
So yes, it's like, it's one very small aspect, which is why you can do yoga so many different ways. Sorry, like I now have dust flying around from that book, which just shows that I haven't read it in a really long
Does it expose you for your lack of reading that book?
time.
Joel
Yes,
had a question a
he
bit for you
did.
back here. It says, I'd like to say Pilates is a lot about survival. What do you think about that idea?
Lord, what is Joel surviving? I don't know. I, I
Well,
will I will have to think about that a little bit and I've never thought about it that way. I don't know. Can you expand, Joel? If you're still on, I know you have a client coming soon, but can you expand about what you mean like survival? Do you mean like living a longer, healthier life, like
I
you
was wondering if
survive
that's it,
longer,
like
or
longevity.
you're just trying to get through your day, like that kind of survival?
Yeah.
Like yeah, or the survival of the species. Like which part of it? Like
The jungle
yeah,
of gravity.
let me see. The jungle, surviving everyday movements and activities. That's what Pilates Plunkett said.
Yeah.
Um, oh, hey, Marquette. Sorry, I know I kept seeing you pop in there, pop in and out. Hey, thank you so much for stopping. My Marquette, Marquette's profile is private,
Hmm.
which I keep telling her she needs to open it up. So, but anyway, Adventures with Declan, she is my friend, and she
Okay.
is this wonderful, she's a yogi and a fitness enthusiast. But what I find most amazing about her page is her hiking spots. She
Okay.
hikes all over Georgia and Tennessee, and I want to say South Carolina, and she travels across America too and hikes different places. But it's very unusual to find a Black woman hiking in the most beautiful places that you can think about.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
she definitely has like a really good feed. So request her friendship
Okay.
on Instagram if
Yeah.
you need to find good hiking spots. Like she's definitely the go-to person for that.
Amazing.
Um, yes, and CCCTT, thank you for your comment. Thanks. I'm glad you like the feed. But yes, I don't know if Joel is still on here, so let's talk a
Hmm.
little bit more about what he said about, Pilates
Survival.
being about survival.
Hmm.
Yeah, like, um, I will let you talk about it first because I don't think anything I'm going to say is very intelligent.
Whatever. um, well, I hear what he's saying. I'm wondering if he's thinking along the lines of longevity. Survival is just in terms of being able to live as long as you can, and like you said, every day as well. That there's a sense of like Ply said about like ease of life, right? Like we
Mhm.
make the things that we do easier by having Plies as part of our daily practice. So that would be my guess with that. Again, that's the way
Yes.
I would interpret that.
Yeah, well, I think that's a pretty good interpretation for sure. Pilates makes makes your everyday movements easier, more efficient, more smooth.
Mhm.
So yes, it improves your quality of life. And for that, maybe your body wants to live longer or is able to live longer. So if
Yes.
that's what we see in terms of survival, yes. In terms of mental health, survival of gravity's effect on your body. Yes,
Yes.
yes. So I guess, yes. So that's what we're saying. So survival of gravity's effect, definitely, yes.
Mhm.
So instead of shrinking, you maintain or maybe even find a little bit more space in your body.
Yes.
But I also think there's a mental health side to Pilates that is really
Absolutely.
important. Just a mental health side to movement. It
Movement.
definitely,
Yep.
I definitely feel happier every time I do Pilates. I feel a little bit more energized, a little bit
Mhm.
more ready to kind of get on with the rest of the day.
Yes.
The movements that are involved in Pilates definitely help me find space within my body, and I can settle into that space throughout the day and kind of work with that space. So, yes,
Yes.
survival in
It's
terms of surviving gravity, but then also mentally being able to deal with various things.
yes.
Yes, and mental toughness
Mental
as well. Yes,
toughness and yeah, like
yes.
that resilience. I love when that just made me laugh. I was thinking about the times where I have like client after client that haven't got a workout in, and I get down the mat to demonstrate an exercise for somebody, and then I'm like, okay, hold on, let me just do the other side before I get up in.
I know. Yes, yes. Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Sometimes I start like, oh my gosh, I wish I could just continue here with them,
Right?
but that would not be very professional. I'm like,
No,
let me just
no.
do the ab series with you, and
Right.
right?
And the next one.
It's funny. I actually have these thoughts where I'm like, maybe I, instead of like doing like a paid session, I should get them to come in and we should just work out together. And
Yeah.
that way I won't feel so bad about
Right.
working out next to them. But it
Yes.
probably wouldn't be such a good session for them.
No. Yeah. That's a thought.
Yes.
One of the other things that I was thinking about as I was preparing for this was
Hmm.
celebrating friendships.
Hmm.
And I'm just really grateful for like our connection and the people
Yes.
that I've met through this digital space. That, and I'm sure this is the same for you too. You meet some people and you're like, wow, it was really nice to meet you. And then you meet other people and you're like, we would totally be friends if we lived closer to one another.
Yes. Yes.
You
There's
know what I
like,
mean?
like the nice thing about being online is I know I definitely annoy my husband. I feel well, I'm not going to say he switches off because I know he's going to walk in and be like, what are you saying about me? But
Yeah.
um, I know definitely there are times when I'm like talking about Pilates and I can see that it's like, well, good for you, but can we get back to talking about what needs to be done, like done at home? Whereas I feel like the nice thing about, like being on social media is that you can find other people who are similarly enthusiastic about topics that nobody else wants to talk about.
Right.
As you, and like you said, you're like, yeah, we would definitely be friends because we spend more time talking about Pilates or about movement, and we're more interested in doing that
Mhm.
than, possibly my neighbor, or the
Right.
person who lives across the street from me who wants to drink wine, and I just want to do, how many different variations of the 100 can you do? or, or what did you
Yes.
find with this person? Like, how do you fix this problem?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, I
Yeah.
find when you get together with Pilates people, it's okay to work out,
Yeah.
excessively.
Right. I know. Well, and it's so funny. And even with my kind of like my relationship counseling background,
Yes.
that kind of lends into the whole conversation about like, husband and wife. You guys have a great
Hmm.
relationship because do your workouts together. And like you were
Yes.
saying about your date night could be posting a workout video
Yes.
sort of thing. But still having someone outside of that
Hmm.
nucleus that you can talk shop with is so healthy.
Yes, yes, it is. It definitely is. And I feel like that's where the social media world has been really good in bringing me together with people that I might not necessarily have met. Like, just like you, I feel like I know so many people and
Mhm.
we haven't necessarily met physically. But
Yes.
I reach out to them and like, I'm like, hey, can you give me advice on this? And, like, or like just random questions, or what do you think about, like, what do you think about this random thing that's happening? Oh, I saw that you have a client who's similar to mine. Tell me what's going on with
Yes.
that client so I can, and
Mhm.
it's normally you would never just go and ask a random person that you had never met before,
Right.
really personal questions.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like, with some of the people that I've met here, I can definitely do that. So
Oh,
there,
you could
social
totally
media,
jump the queue. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
social media in that sense has been, a lot of people say it's a negative, but I still feel overall it's been a positive for me. And I'm very
Absolutely.
grateful for this Pilates community that's online and all the discussions that are being had.
Mhm.
Whether they are firing people up in a bad way or in a good way, at least it's good we're having these conversations versus just wondering about them in our own heads.
The word that I've been musing on a lot lately is
Mm-hmm.
catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the things that we say or do or happen to us that become like that precipitate other things happening? So there's a lot of things that we see happening right now, and we can talk
Mm-hmm.
like scorecards since the last time we talked and where
Yes,
our world is at. But I like the fact that even if something's been negative, it's a catalyst for something positive to follow up from
absolutely.
it.
Yes.
So I don't get this like there's no dismay if I see someone getting called out or someone's offended by something. It's like, okay, well, if that made you think, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yes.
If
Yes.
that was 100% wrong, but it still give you pause and then you're be more mindful moving forward, that was actually still a good thing.
Yes. And I feel like what's happening in Pilates now is very representative of what is happening overall in society. And I don't
Yes.
know why certain people thought the Pilates world was gonna be cocooned off, or like, because we definitely didn't have it down perfectly. Like it did, there were definitely things happening within this Pilates space that were not okay or that needed to stop.
Yep.
So when people get, offended or upset, I'm wondering what they thought was going to, like, the rest of the world is having these discussions.
Right.
So what do you think was going to exclude this particular practice
Yeah.
from,
Thought we
like,
were immune
yeah,
to that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like you said, and definitely after, the greatest victories or the greatest positive changes often come after a period of necessary discomfort. And I feel like what's
Yes.
going on now is just a period of necessary discomfort. And ultimately, we can all be better and more connected for it, or there will be people who fall along, who fall off along the way.
Yes.
Um, so hopefully it leads to, I feel like it's necessary discomfort that's leading to more togetherness, and I feel also more Pilates. I feel like more people are going to come to Pilates
Yes.
because now people start having discussions about how to bring those people to Pilates.
Hmm.
If you finally have people voicing out what made them uncomfortable, it will make at least a few people think about what they were doing to be involved in that discomfort and how
Yep.
they can stop doing that. And then ultimately, it will mean that more people come to this practice and this practice sticks around for a little bit longer.
I didn't think
Right.
about that stick around longer piece, but
Mhm.
you're right. That really is so true because it kind of for me it ties back to one of the quotes from Malcolm X where he said that this isn't just a black in the USA problem. This is a humanity problem.
Mhm.
And when he brought in a conversation like that, I've looked at everything through that lens of this is a humanity thing.
Yes.
And for our Pilates community to be addressing issues of racism and representation and the fitness industry in general, we've used this one small lane of Pilates and said, well, wait a minute, this is actually a very broad conversation. And as a result of that, now Pilates moves forward because we've had these hard conversations about race or about
Mhm.
lineage or about, you know, where you did your apprenticeship program, whatever, and realize that we need to actually have these hard conversations and not just remain in our silos if the whole thing is going to move forward.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think these discussions are important, and if you look back historically over time, anytime there was something major that, changed in society, there were always people who were like, well, I was fine before and I was
Mm-hmm.
happy with the way things were.
Yes.
Why do I have to change anything? But ultimately, for society to move forward to the place where we are now,
Yes.
something had to change, right?
Yes.
For us to be here, people had to decide to leave the things that they were unhappy with in Europe and start making. I'm not saying that the migration was perfect or that it was done the
Mm-hmm.
right way, but people had to leave, be uncomfortable crossing the sea, possibly dying in the process to
Yes.
decide to live in this new country. And like, I would say at the end of, or when I'm, it's hard to say the end of slavery because there've been so many problems
Mm-hmm.
after still. but still, like, slavery didn't end peacefully. It wasn't like people died for it to not end. And,
Yes.
there were those who died for it to end. So things,
Mhm.
every great change has come after a period of discomfort. And I feel like this can definitely be a period where we can have great change. If we just kind of smother things out and say, ooh, we know, like, no, 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 we're not going to do this in Pilates and we're not going to have these hard discussions, then things just stay the same. And
They're gonna
certain
stay the
people
same.
are constantly excluded from this practice. And
Mhm.
eventually something else will take the place of Pilates, and this practice might not survive. Despite its popularity today, it's still
Yes.
not as popular as things like yoga. It's still not as
No,
popular
no, no.
as things like Orange Theory, things that are hurting
Yep.
people. It's not as popular as those things. And for this practice to have longevity and to stay around, it needs to be more inclusive of everybody. And
Yes.
everybody can do Pilates. That's the amazing thing about Pilates.
Yes.
There's so many other types of movement and fitness that I think I was listening to the podcast, I think yesterday, that you had where you were saying that not everybody can do ballet and not everybody can be a gymnast. And
Mhm.
there's not necessarily longevity in those types of movement for everybody. But
Right.
Pilates you can do for a very long time, for, like probably
Yes.
for your whole life, and
Yep.
everybody can be involved.
That's really like
Mm-hmm.
legit one of the reasons why I got into Pilates,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't believe in retiring because I just like being an entrepreneur. And I figured I may not want to get under squats and deadlifts at 90 when I could just do
Yes.
verbal. Like if my verbal cues are on point at 90, I could teach Pilates until, till I'm
Yes.
done, right? So,
I mean, look at Jay Grimes. I mean,
right.
I know we don't know how old he is, but he's probably older in the
We could
60s.
look it up. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. you know, and he's still teaching, and he's still a really good teacher, and he's,
Yeah.
still, he's still upright, and, has good posture and is walking around. So yes,
Yeah.
why do you have to, unless you really want to retire? But if you don't want to, why not continue? Why not have longevity in your career and
Right.
also, for your clients?
Yeah,
Like, why not
exactly.
teach the same clients that you were teaching 10 years ago,
Mhm.
still doing Pilates?
For sure. As we
Mhm.
learn, we continue to hand that off to them, and they learn from
Yes,
us, right? So
yes.
we're always in this process. So as long as we stay like slightly ahead of them,
Mhm.
we can keep growing,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Before
Yes.
we get too far from the
Mhm.
uncomfortable comment,
Yes.
I like that concept because in general, conflict should make you richer.
Hmm.
Like if you like a marriage example, right? Like I mean, if you
Hmm.
are on the same page in terms of trying to enrich a relationship and you are in conflict, the point of the conflict is to land at a resolution, is not to just win the shouting match.
Yes. Hmm.
So we're not out there to just win. Like we're on the same team and we're fighting for something. We're not me against you. And I think that the more that we have these conversations, and even though they're uncomfortable, when you pause for a moment, you recognize, wait a minute, we are, like I said at the beginning, we're all on the same team. We're all fighting for the same thing, but we're fighting for it from different angles.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it's interesting the way you're talking about like marriage, and I think about friendships too.
Hmm.
And my greatest friendships, and like, well, I only have one marriage, but my greatest friendships are are
I
the
have
ones
that
where,
too. So
yes,
again,
yes,
yes.
my greatest friendships are the ones where we have not necessarily always agreed on everything, but we
Yes.
have been able to work through those, like whatever disagreements we had. It's not
Hmm.
always where we're like, oh, I'm so happy to see you, and I, like everything is great. Sometimes it's like, you really annoyed me just now. How are we going to fix this situation? You just
Yes.
did something to really annoy me.
Hmm.
Okay, let's figure this out because I still want to have you in my life. And I feel like
Yes.
those are the best relationships. Those are the friendships where if I don't see you for 2 years or 3 years, we get together and we just take off where we left off.
Yes.
Versus, and I know as an adult it becomes harder to make friends because as soon as somebody annoys you, you're like, I'm done with that person. I'm not going to
Yeah.
hang out with them anymore. But
Right.
if you make an effort to actually form relationships with people that you don't agree on everything with, then you can love them past any
Hmm.
disagreements. And
Yes.
you'll find that too. Like, I don't know if you're the same as me, Martin. Like, I have friends where I'm like, I'm not sure why they're doing that way, but oh well, that's fine. That's her way of doing it. I still
Yes.
want to hang out with her.
Hmm.
And I find if you can have that kind of relationship with people, then that is like true unconditional love with somebody. And like, it's, yeah.
Yes.
and
No,
how it should be.
exactly.
And it's
Yeah.
the same with Pilates. I just wish, like, this,
Mhm.
and I know right now there's a lot of discussion. Well, there was a discussion between classical and contemporary, which is almost like two people going to an ice cream counter and just, fighting over whether chocolate is better than strawberry.
Yes.
It's almost, I sit there watching these back and forths, and to me, I like classical, but I've
Hmm.
taken a lot of good contemporary teachers classes, or
Yes.
teachers who consider themselves to be contemporary. I've taken their classes and thought and had really good experiences.
Yeah.
So it really is, when I go on these discussion boards, I sometimes don't even know what to write, because it's almost like, yeah, like being at an ice cream counter and having two kids say strawberry's best, no, chocolate's best, no, vanilla is best. Oh, no, no, a mix between, like a mix between the two is best. And,
Yes.
strawberry was here first. It's the one that nature made. So, like it's almost like, what is this noise? Like, it's just crazy. Um,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I feel like when I watch those, I'm like, well, you know what? Like, I'm just going to keep doing what I like to do and
That's what
keep
it
going to the
is.
teachers that I like to practice with and learning
Right.
from the people that, I kind of click with.
Mhm.
Now the only, like, and I was talking to Joel about this too, the only time I feel there is a problem is if you go to the ice cream counter and you're like, well, I don't really like any of these flavors, so I'm going to put a whole bucket of sand in this stuff and let's see how it turns out, right? And I feel
Yes.
like that's where there's a problem in
Hmm.
Pilates, when people, like, when I watch certain things that I'm like, oh, that looks a little dangerous, or
A
it
little
looks like it's
destructive.
gonna, yeah, it doesn't, like, I'm not quite sure what happened here. And it happens in both classical and contemporary. You will hear
Right.
that students went into a classical class and they got hurt by the teacher because the
Hmm.
teacher was not able to figure out how to teach a client an exercise, or how to say, you're not going to do this exercise today. That's also
Yes.
that's also something that people need to be able to say.
It's true.
Actually, we're going to skip this today and just move on, because I don't think this is right for today. And
Hmm.
maybe we'll come back to it, in a little while.
Yes.
And that is where students get hurt in classical. Same thing with contemporary, like, just crazy exercises coming in, like people just making up stuff without it
Right.
being like intelligent movement. I feel like that's where people get hurt, and that's where the classical people are like, no, contemporary is what hurts everyone, and then contemporary is
Yeah.
like, well, I went to classical and I got hurt in classical, and it's like, well, it's just, like,
No,
no.
it's just that's just collectively that's just bad
Yeah,
teachers.
yeah, it's just like you had a bad experience, or
Yeah, bad
like,
experience.
yeah, yeah, and this is where yoga differs too from Pilates. In the yoga world, if you have a bad teacher, they blame it on the student.
Yeah.
You just weren't breathing enough. That's why you
Right.
got hurt.
Right. Yeah, oh man,
So,
that's
yeah.
no, that's a great like, and Joel said there, that is a great illustration. Like I will definitely like requote that because it is like an ice cream
Yeah.
stand and everyone's just choosing their
hmm
favorite flavor at times.
Yeah, choose your flavor, whatever, like, tastes good. Keep it intelligent, and it's
Yep.
probably still going to be good movement. And Pilates is movement; it's
Hmm.
intelligent movement. And just be cautious of throwing in sand, or like something which is not even related to ice cream, and
Yes.
trying to make that. That's where I feel is a problem. Like, if you
Yes.
throw in, like, just, yeah, I can't think of the one thing, but when you throw in stuff where I'm just like, that looks kind of day, like if you're standing on,
Hmm.
one shoulder block with one foot and waving around a magic circle. I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not, like, that's where I have to be like, oh, okay, let's
Right, right, right.
yeah.
But I mean, you can even go into stuff like body shaming or,
hmm
all that stuff as well. Like that, all that stuff ties into it as well. When you start to hate on another, group of people altogether, anything that's not
hmm
inclusive in our language, anything that's not inclusive in our
yeah.
approach, in the way we present the work,
hmm
that's all destructive work, right?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, all that comes under, that's not Pilates either. Like, telling
No.
people, you need to lose weight. And, like, I feel like we're going to what the conversation we've had over the last week, or what we've been witnessing over the last week, where
Yes.
we had one lady, write a lot of stuff on her profile about, about Anula, and, like a couple of other
Yes.
teachers too. And
Nicola.
I, huh?
Nicola? Nicola?
Yes.
Yes.
Nicola, and also,
Anula.
like sometimes I can only think of the Instagram name. So yeah,
Yes,
it's
I know. Yeah.
Nicola, and it's also, oh my gosh, like why isn't it coming to me right now? It will in a minute. But yes, there was three teachers that I'm aware of, probably more that got deleted too. But there
Hmm.
was a lot of talk about your body's not doing it the right way, or you should go back and learn something, learn this series again because you're not using the chair properly, stuff like that. But I will, before I talk too much about that, I do have to say one thing that I'm disappointed in the Pilates community overall too is that we did not talk too much about this woman's mental health state. While all the things she said were
Yes.
wrong,
Hmm.
when I look at the amount of stuff that came out of her, it sound it there definitely, for me, it feels like there is something, a different issue at hand. And I know that
Yes.
she has said she's mentally fine, but it definitely doesn't sound like this is somebody who is in the best state of mental health. And
Right.
maybe we need to look at whether how do we address when one of our community members
Hmm.
is having mental problems or having a mental
Right.
breakdown.
Yes.
However, with that being said, a lot of the things she said were not unique to her. I've heard them before from other teachers, maybe not all at once about, the same person, but I have heard other people comment on, or I have seen it written, people write comments about a teacher's hair, or,
Right.
stuff that is not related to Pilates,
Hmm.
maybe lose a little bit of weight, or you are not doing that right because people from a certain place just don't have the attributes to do that. Or just random crazy stuff which doesn't make sense. Um, I've seen that happen in the Pilates community way before COVID, way before all
Oh,
of
for sure.
all of
Yeah.
this. There are those teachers that are on social media to go around policing accounts and just making unhelpful comments that are actually quite harmful.
You know what though? I just dismiss all that as insecurities. Really.
Well,
Like
it's
when you have
easy
to
to.
posture yourself to say like,
Mhm.
look, I see this, this is how it's supposed to be done, and to put my
Mhm.
comments on someone else's like unsolicited on someone else's page, that's your
Yeah.
own insecurities. I could just okay, run along. Thank you.
So, Nate, like you might be able to do that, but I think that is what keeps people out of the studio because there are
Yes.
already those clients that feel insecure in their bodies. They come into the studio, and then if you have a teacher saying, "No, no, no, we're not going to put you on that machine because for now you still have a little bit of weight loss to." Like, and they might not say it in those specific words, but you definitely get a sense when you go into a studio and somebody is frustrated with the fact that you have a weave or you have an afro or something which is
Yeah.
not they're not used to dealing with,
Hmm.
and now they have to deal with it, and like it's a problem, so they don't give you certain things, or they don't treat you exactly the same way.
Okay.
um, and I feel like clients can definitely feel when that is happening, and that is why we
Absolutely.
don't see certain people in the studio.
Yeah.
We just don't see them. Like, you go into a studio, and a lot of studios are very, very undiverse. You
Hmm.
only have a certain type of client. And even within the white population, you don't have the LGBT community is not involved.
Right.
Like, you don't have a lot of overweight people that come to the gym, or a
Hmm.
lot of larger size bodies, even though a lot of them are perfectly able to do Pilates. Like, there
Yes.
isn't, like, just because you're not a size 2 or a size 4 doesn't mean that you can't do Pilates. People are
Right.
perfectly able to do Pilates, but the feeling they get when they come into the studio is not a welcoming one.
Hmm.
And you have a lot of teachers who are also not trained to deal with anybody who doesn't look like them.
That's part of it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Like, if,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
Teresa says it too. Like they're welcome, but they're not welcome, right? Like everyone's aware enough to say the
Yeah.
right things,
Mm-hmm.
but still they're not really
Yeah.
reaching out and connecting and making
Mm-hmm.
specific populations feel welcomed, right?
Yeah. And, and that's what I posted about this the other day. I'm very happy we're having these conversations. One of the things that was, and I love Anula. Like, I love Anula. I think she's definitely opened up the space to a lot of people who were not welcome before. I know that she has made a lot of people feel welcome in her classes and with her style of teaching. And I feel like her platform is amazing. Like she's a great teacher.
Yes.
But what I was still disappointed in was, like I said, these things, these comments have been made in the past. These comments, things have been said a lot of times about non-white students or non-white, people on social media.
Hmm.
And I feel like the reaction in the past has always been, especially from senior teachers, has always been, well, we're really sorry that's happening. Why don't we do a scholarship program? Or why don't we
Yes.
do, you can come to my studio, I will give you free classes. Or
Hmm.
you can, like, there's always this like, well, I don't really know what to do when it comes to my colleagues or how to fix the situation at large. How do I as an individual get more people to present at a conference? I don't know how I'm supposed to do that. However, in this instant, this last week,
Hmm.
I think I've seen more people comment on like the different posts that were made about this particular scenario where we had derogatory comments made about
Yes.
Anula
Hmm.
than when like when everything was happening over COVID, where the Black
Yes.
community
The
was
Black
voicing,
business.
yeah, we were voicing our concerns and we were voicing things that had happened to us, and we were kind of talking about how we felt, and everybody, the response generically was, well, so sorry that you're going through that. I had no idea.
Yes. Yes.
And nobody's upset. Like,
Hmm.
or very
Hmm.
few people. I don't want to say nobody. There were
Right.
very few people who were upset. And the ones who were upset were very likely upset before we said anything.
Right.
But
Yes.
generally, most people just are like, well, what are we supposed to do about this? I have no idea how to fix this. Now it comes to this situation, and people are like, we are outraged. This has to stop. We absolutely can't do this anymore. Power Pilates, what are you going to do about this? This is one of your people. And then you have all these people coming and like actually, like pressuring an
Yes.
organization to do something about it.
Right.
Whereas this has happened before. Why did nobody? Why was everybody so helpless in the past? Why
Right.
not this time? Why didn't people just say, "Oh, Nula, so sorry this is happening to you,
Right.
but we don't really know. Like this is just ignore her. Don't pay any attention to her." No,
Right.
people came out. You had Rael Isakovitz make a whole post about this, and I went back down on his feed. I went back down on the Bosy feed to try and find something about, like when everything was happening with George Floyd, or when things were happening,
Yes.
I was trying to find something on there
Hmm.
that was just as meaningful. And I was like,
Right.
I'm struggling here.
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
I know you're an inclusive person and you welcome all students to your space, but I didn't see much of that outrage. I didn't see much of this has to stop and this is not what Pilates stands for. We're not having this anymore in our community.
So are you basically saying, okay, I see it happening now, but where were you before?
Yeah, like what, like, and I'm hoping that going forward, if
Yes.
a non-white Pilates teacher or student voices a concern, that we can
Hmm.
have a similar reaction in the community, that we can
Yes.
have a similar coming together where
Right.
everybody agrees what happened was wrong
Hmm.
and these things need to stop happening, and what are we going to do about it if it happens again, or how are we going to stop it from happening again. I
Right.
mean, now
Exactly.
everybody's very clear. If you go out there and you decide to fat shame someone, or you decide to comment on somebody's body parts,
Yeah.
like
People
actually
pounce
making
now.
posts,
Yeah.
there's a chance you might lose your certification. Your certifying body might not stand behind you, and they might pull your certification, which
Yes.
means that you will not be able to teach. And if that is your main source of income, you will not have a livelihood anymore.
Hmm.
Whereas in the past, I haven't really seen that being done. I cannot think of an instance
No.
where, a teacher's certification has been pulled due to racism or discrimination or anything like that.
Right.
So,
That.
yeah.
So that's a
Mm-hmm.
that's a great thing that we're at that
Mm-hmm.
this point now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Like
Yeah.
we're at this point where, okay, we see that it is possible to do those things, to take a
Yes.
hard stance, where
Right.
companies come out and say, we do not stand behind this. This
Hmm.
is not what we're about. This person is no longer part of our group of teachers. And I think that if that happened every time,
Hmm.
then the industry would look different.
Right.
People will no longer be as tolerant to certain types of behavior that are exclusive to others.
That's that comes back to what I was saying about a catalyst.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because like the reality is that it won't happen again because this
Mm-hmm.
happened this time.
Mm-hmm.
Because like there is enough hard evidence out there you can screenshot. Well, this happened with this person. Where are you
Yes.
now?
Mm-hmm.
That's the easier question to ask than where were you before.
Mm-hmm.
Like I almost don't personally care about the where were you before.
Yes.
I'm really concerned about what happens from today forward, or from this week
Mm-hmm.
forward, or from this incident forward, instead of like blasting this canyon and saying, where were you
Mm-hmm.
6 months ago? This happened 15 years ago with this person. Not that you're saying like that, but like we do that, right? Like a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
us, as a community, we're quick to blow that cannon and be like, okay, well, I don't care about your efforts today. I want to know where
Mm-hmm.
you were before. Whereas my message is almost the opposite. I was like, okay, you're here today. I want to see if you can move in integrity from this point forward.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. And the reason I mention what, like the past few months or what's happened in the
Mhm.
past is because, like obviously people know what the right thing to do is. Obviously,
Yes.
you do know that, you do know how to enforce consequences. You do
Yes.
know how to do these things. So going forward, if something like this happens to a teacher who is a person of color or black,
Yes.
then, hopefully we can take the same stance going forward. I know we've not done it in the past, but going forward, this is what needs to happen.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah.
That's, I
So,
mean, and
mhm.
that is, I'm sure you personally would do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Like
that's,
it's like, yeah, it's like, it's I don't always have all the words because I guess like I'm not necessarily an educator in the anti-racism space, but I definitely, yeah, it's easy for everybody to see. If everybody can be outraged this time, then you can be outraged next time too. You can write
yes.
a comment.
Right.
You can show your outrage. And I was listening to a great so there's this great podcast that I'm listening to that is called Do the Work. It's
Mhm.
a new podcast. And he was, like one of the things he mentioned, which really stuck was that if society as a whole is outraged about something,
Mhm.
generally those behaviors are either reduced or they're eliminated from society. Things that
Yes.
are harmful to, members of that community.
Yes.
It's like children, right? If you see a child, something happening, if you see a child being molested, for example,
Mhm.
if your reaction is to be like, I'm going to close this door and not look and just pretend it didn't happen, um, that's not going to do anything.
Mhm.
But in the past, people used to do that. They would see children being harmed
And just turn a
and
blind
they
eye.
would be like, oh man, we can't really do much about it. And that's a really powerful person. So let's be quiet, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
However, if you start screaming and you start, like you are outraged, one, in that moment, whatever is happening stops.
Yes.
And two, it's less likely to continue happening. It's less
Yes.
likely for, like hopefully that person gets arrested anyway.
Mhm.
And in societies where they don't get arrested, hopefully they think twice
Yeah.
before, going out to molest a child again. But
Mhm.
if everybody just goes, well, let's talk about this really calmly and peacefully, maybe we give them a chance to explain why they were doing that, like there might be a
Yes.
deeper explanation behind it. Um, then it ends up just, like it ends up not stopping very much.
Right. Right.
Let's have a really calm conversation. But if you are like absolutely never again,
Mhm.
um, then people are like, whoa, okay, let me
Yeah.
maybe, yeah,
I hear
yeah,
you. I hear you.
mm-hmm,
That's a great
yes.
point. We have 3 minutes left.
I know, right? I know. Time
That's
always goes so quick.
It does. It does. Yeah, and that's I want to keep that conversation going around like that outrage and then that
Mm-hmm,
catalyst and moving forward, calling
mm-hmm.
them to accountability from the like there's so many intricate pieces to what we're saying here that I think we can unpack a little bit more because it really is the blueprint moving forward.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. We just solved the
So
problems of the world today again.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I would say to studio owners, if you see things happen at your studio that are othering people or that are creating an environment where, people don't feel welcome, not just personally try to create an environment, but if any of your teachers are creating an environment that is not welcoming, take a hard stance on it. And
Yep.
people will stop doing that. I promise you, they will.
It's true.
Um, mhm. Yeah,
Gotta
within trainings, within studios, at
Yes.
conferences. I was very impressed by, again, this is like Instagram. This is terrible. Like once I learned an Instagram name, Nab Levy, it's her
Oh,
first name,
Nikki.
Nab,
No,
Nikki. Yes,
Nikki
yes,
Napoli. Yeah.
Nikki. I think she posted something the other day saying that she was not going to present at the PMA
Yes.
because she did not agree with certain things. Now,
Right.
can you imagine if all the presenters at the PMA decided that they needed the PMA to do something and they
Hmm.
were not going to present at the PMA until the PMA did that, until the PMA gave into their requests,
Yes.
right? Like if you
Yes.
want to see more diversity on the panel,
Yes.
um, if you refuse to present until you see that, then I mean
Yes.
that will happen so much faster
It
than
will.
just waiting for the PMA to get to do something.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
yeah.
Wow, I have a PMA comment, and I'll probably just I'll do it like online on our Facebook group page. Guys, follow us on Facebook as well, and I'll put it there because we got 50 seconds left. But
Mhm.
it just ties exactly into that. I'm a panelist on the weekend, and that was a real struggle for me to say yes to that. And I'll put it.
Mhm.
There's my teaser for our conversation that'll continue online after. Alexa, thank you so much. I mean, I love chatting with you. You're just so authentic and so great to chat with. So thank you very much.
No, thanks for having me on again. And anybody who's listening in, if you're ever in Atlanta, come see us, here in Duluth at Vitality Method. Come do Pilates with us. It's an awesome studio. And there's so much more than just Pilates, too. Like there's other fun stuff at the studio, too. But yeah,
Yes.
that was good
Good.
chatting with you, Mark.